Welcome to MapleWooding.com podcast. We have on the phone our favorite real estate agent, man among many with the buying and selling of the homes in town. Mark Slade, how you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you?
Okay, well, longtime followers of MapleWooding.com know you. We always like to talk to you about the status of the real estate market, and of course, you are with Keller Williams and the Slade Group. What is your exact title of your...
Slade Home Team.
Slade Home Team.
Yep.
For those who want to get to you, what's the best website and email?
GoodHomesForGoodPeople.com. That's mobilely optimized. Or MaplewoodandSouthOrangeHomes.com. That telephone number is 917-797-5059. And email is sladehomes@gmail.
And we always link to your open house listings every Sunday, which seem to get bigger and bigger. What is sort of the status these days? I know last time we've talked to you, it's been a seller's market here. Is that still the case? How are things
in
that world?
Joe. You know, obviously it's very simple economics, supply and demand. Supply continues to remain low, although it has been inching and ratcheting its way up since the beginning of the spring season. We currently have 73 homes active on the market. 5 have accepted offers and are in attorney review. At least they're noted as such. Mm-hmm. We have a net inventory of 68, which is still less than half of what it normally is this time of year. And yet the buyers are out there in full force. So when you're giving them something that they're looking for, you'll have lines out the door with an open house, and we will have the results that we've had year to date, which is that we're selling homes for almost 102% of asking price. The average price paid year to date is up almost 8%. Mm-hmm. So last year at this time, the average home price sold was $520,000.
This is only in Maplewood.
Only in Maplewood.
And you have 68 homes on the market in Maplewood.
Net, after subtracting the 5 that have noted as having accepted offers and are in attorney review.
And go ahead, I'm sorry, about the average selling price.
That's okay. So this year the average home sale price is $561 versus last year's $520. That represents 7.8%, but almost 8% increase in average price paid. And that is substantial. Last year, 2014, for the entirety of the year, we were up 6.5% versus the entirety of the year before, 2013. So we are continuing to see an escalation in prices being paid for homes.
And are you talking about similar inventory, though, this year versus last year, or is it always kind of the same level? More or less.
Actually, last year we actually had a down year, so we ended up selling 292 homes, if I remember correctly, when we normally, the year before, sold 325. Mm-hmm. This year, however, sales in terms of sheer numbers of units are actually up. We've sold and closed 257 units so far at this point this year versus 237 last year, so that's up 8.5%. Mm-hmm. So the likelihood is that we will, with another 50 homes currently under contract, let me double-check that to make sure, but if I remember correctly, 51 homes currently under contract. So, you add that 51 to the current 257, we're already at 308. So we will definitely be continuing to build on it. And we still have some time to go this year. It's only October 11th. And believe it or not, since the average closing time frame is 45 days, it's very likely that number will hit, the 325 mark that we had in 2013 in terms of units, which will be amazing because the turn relative to the average inventory is going to be in the neighborhood of over 5 times. And that's kind of unheard of. So that's why, going back to your original question, it is a seller's market.
And the
right product, it'll sell.
And the turn, explain to me what the turn means.
Well, it just means how many homes sell versus the average inventory.
Okay.
So, last year, make it very simple. Last year, we sold, like I said, about 292 homes, and the average inventory was twice what it is now.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so at the very least, if we sold the same number of homes, our turn would be double what it was last year.
And that's based on because there are fewer homes on the market, you're saying?
Yeah, and what comes on the market sells so quickly.
Excellent.
So another way of measuring that is something we call days on market, DOM. Days on market dropped from 42.3 to 35.7. That's almost 16% drop in the length of time it has taken to sell the homes that have sold. Mm. Now, there's always inventory that's not sold.
Right.
And those have substantially longer days on market.
And the is the fall a better time than the spring? Or does it really not matter? Is the way things
If you're
going
to go by overall statistics, there's no doubt the spring market is always the strongest. We deal with what we call the bonus babies. That means that the people that in December found out what their annual review was, which so many people have, their bonuses are given out to them at the end of December, going into January. And so they're feeling really strong about their jobs usually, or those that are feeling strong about their jobs and their income are able to leverage that into home purchases, knowing that we keep hearing about interest rates going to be climbing, and prices, without a doubt, are climbing. So keeping that in mind, as prices climb, it gets that much harder to stay up with what the average price is in terms of what it's going to cost you. So if interest rates also kick in and do accelerate any, that'll just make it that much tougher. So today's buyers, they're out in full force.
Is there
the right product?
Is there a certain area of town that's selling better or worse than others? You know, in this town, one of the things that's interesting is we have $1 million homes, and we have average price homes, and we have cheaper homes. Is anything better than anything else now?
I will say that I don't think there's anything that's particularly better. I'm going to answer the question in two ways. Number one, I will say that statistically speaking, we have had quite a few more $1 million plus homes in Maplewood listed and sold. So we will end up doubling last year's, and that probably is an impact on how we're going to see the prices increase. But considering we're going to go from what amounted to 6 to 12 homes, and we've sold 257, it's not that much of a factor. The real factor here is that when you've got that master bedroom home, you've got renovated kitchens and baths, those products are flying. That's where the lines are out the door. So, when I first got into real estate back in 2009, the sweet spot in this town was between 450, 575. The sweet spot has now climbed to basically 600 to 750. That's a pretty big increase, and that is, where today's buyers that we are finding are giving us the greatest likelihood of multiple bids. So, when you've got the right property, type of property, and you've got the right condition, and then, of course, the right price on it, you will have a line out the door and you will have multiples. When you don't have all three of those factors, obviously things will, dampen a tad.
Excellent. Again, we're talking to Mark Slade from Keller Williams and the Slade Home Team about the real estate market. Why is there such a still demand? Our taxes are still high, but have they kind of leveled off in most? But what's still drawing people here?
Well, there's been several factors. First off, even going back to when I first moved out here, when I was executive vice president of the fashion business, I wanted a town that was commutable.
Right.
I was living in Brooklyn. My commute in Brooklyn was, about 30, 35 minutes on the F train and holding onto the strap.
Yeah.
My commute when I moved out to Maplewood was 35 minutes sitting down in a nice chair. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Right.
So, in that sense, those kinds of people, especially if they're both working, you kind of view the taxes as the commuter tax, because where else can you, with that budget, afford to buy as much physically large-size homes with a nice piece of property to enjoy outside for barbecues, and if you have kids, watching your kids play or throwing a ball around, where else can you do that with that budget? And I can count it on one finger, okay, because in that usual, since location is always key, in that 35-minute radius from New York City, it's hard-pressed to find anything that you can afford. That's what makes us, so attractive. Then, on top of that, last October, Maple was published as one of those towns to live in New York Times.
Right.
And, the minute that article was published, the amount of orange and blue license plates, meaning New York State license plates, quadrupled. I mean, there almost seem to be more New York plates than New Jersey plates in downtown Maplewood.
Yes.
So that certainly has fueled the fire. And, at the time, I was actually interviewed by the New York Times, and I called Maplewood Brooklyn West. And a lot of people have jumped on the Brooklyn West.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Brooklyn West moniker,
okay.
but I can see why it's a good draw for people who want to come here and know that we're not the average New Jersey suburb.
Well, it's
in a good way.
I mean, Brooklyn has always been, Joe, the most popular, from all of my record keeping, the majority or the biggest share of people moving into Maplewood are millennials coming from Brooklyn.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and if you're a Brooklyn person, knowing that you're now paying $9.66 a square foot, and in Maplewood you can pay $300 a square foot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and preserve the social diversity, economic diversity, cultural diversity. It's a great blend of what you can achieve and making a transition. People from Brooklyn, I'm on these listservs. There are people from Brooklyn that are afraid. Where do I go? Where can I move? Because I can't afford to stay here anymore.
And when did you move here?
I moved here originally in '97.
So you said exactly what I think is an interesting point is if you're in Brooklyn, and I went to college in Brooklyn and lived there for a while, so I hear what you're saying. And if you're unless you're right over the bridge, but even then you're at least 20 minutes or more on the train, and like you said, stuffed in like a sardine. You get on the right train out of Maplewood, and you're in 30 minutes or so, and depending on where you work in Manhattan, you can be close to things more than you might be by a certain subway stop. But every time I look at the listings, the taxes are high. But are the schools still the draw? Is it mostly the commute? Is it also sort of the liberal, diverse, mellow atmosphere here?
It's all of those.
Yeah.
Things. I mean, the school rankings have climbed for Maplewood Sound Orange. When you follow New Jersey Monthly Magazine, that's been a plus for us.
And now we're the best downtown in the state, according to New Jersey Monthly,
yep.
right?
Exactly.
That was a little bit of a stuffed ballot box, but I will gladly agree with the outcome because I think it was a correct outcome. The couple things go ahead.
I admit that I probably voted an extra time or two.
Oh, I voted several times. And the mayor, as you saw, was
a question of
advising people to vote as much as you can.
Well, yeah, not just that. That was the kind of thing it was, and I think that kind of shows the kind of community that Maplewood is.
Yes,
it's a small town, and yet it was so active and so involved that we beat out towns like Princeton and Westfield and Summit. I mean,
and a lot of towns that are bigger than us that have more people who could have voted and didn't for whatever reason. Yeah, and it's interesting. The other thing I'm going to ask you is we always ask about. Personally, for me as a homeowner, I'm always curious about what helps your home become attractive and what doesn't. What are you finding now is the biggest draw specifically to a home? You and I have talked in the past about having your home ready to sell, having it look nice. What are you seeing today is the thing that people are doing well to make their homes sellable, and what are they not doing? Is it replacing an oil tank? Is it having it painted? Is it making sure it's flood-proof? What is the buyer looking for that a homeowner can do pretty easily that they are doing or are not doing enough of?
All right, so this is going to be one of those 80-20 things. You garner 80% of your interest, okay, by having a renovated kitchen, still with stainless appliances. The new floor type usually is a porcelain tile that looks like wood with a lot of gray in it. In most cases, they like the granite countertops. Those types of looks that are also replicated in bathrooms are drawing people in like flies. I mean, it's crazy, okay? At the same time, if you haven't done a tank sweep and made sure that you don't have an oil tank that has to be removed, you will find that's an Achilles heel to a transaction.
Yeah. Are you finding a lot of that, or are most homes pretty cleared out of those?
Oh, no.
No, it's still a big thing?
We're still finding a good number
of
homes that have the oil tanks. Well, because there was a period of time where it was appropriate to just simply decommission your tank. The problem is that 90% of those, or 70%, according to the people I speak to, 70% of those decommissioned tanks have leaked.
Yeah, we had one too. We had to clean ours out, and it's all cleaned up and good, but it's something that definitely is bad.
A big issue in terms of making sure if you're a buyer, you do a tank sweep. If you're a seller, I recommend doing a tank sweep before you put your house on the market.
Right.
The worst thing that can happen is you're close to the finish line, and all of a sudden you find a tank that's a leaker, and then you got 6 to 8 weeks worth of remediation. Your buyer says, I'm not going to hang around. So now you've been on the market, and when you have to finally get back on the market, that people are saying something obviously was wrong with that house. Even though, you can say it was an oil tank, but it doesn't matter. Statistically, you're not going to put in the advertising, had oil tank, lost buyer. You will in the agent remarks, but you won't do that in the national advertising.
People don't. You don't want any surprises.
No.
And you don't want people don't want to have to do more to a house than they need to, right?
Correct.
The other question, another thing that's come up recently, we're getting a lot of inquiries from solar panel companies who want you to take advantage of the solar deals. And now, where does that? And there's a few in Maplewood. I believe we had one of the first. Was it up on Rutgers Street? One of the first solar homes, or a first of some program. Where do you?
I sold one last year, or I sold one 2 years ago in Colgate, actually.
Are they a draw for the resale, or are people a little scared of having these big panels on their house that maybe they think are ugly?
No one is as concerned about the aesthetics. I mean, the aesthetic issue is probably a far smaller issue. The bigger issue, unfortunately, is the leases that are on these programs.
Right.
And how you actually installed them. Did you pay for it outright? If you did, you're great.
Yeah.
But most people didn't. They took advantage of special leaseback programs. And those are pretty complicated, and those are those kind of troubled waters you have to negotiate in attorney review, and also with your title agencies before you close. Because the challenge with a solar panel on the roof is that, there's a lien attached to the property often if you're still paying for it, and it's all these types of things that make it incredibly complicated. So while it's a thing that is a increasing trend, okay, it does come with the caveat that it's great for the owner, and it would be great for the buyer and new owner to be, but in the middle of that is the challenges of how you work out the logistics and all that of transfer of ownership. And while they say it's easy, it's never as easy as they say it is.
So it sounds like if you've gotten the solar panels and you've worked out the finances so that when you sell, the buyer doesn't have to deal with liens or paying off, then like I said, the aesthetic isn't bad, and you're also getting a solar paneled home that gives you free or at least reduced energy costs. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But it isn't become an aesthetic concern generally, right?
No, I don't have too many people complaining about the aesthetics.
How many have you sold with solar panels on them over?
So far, 2, 1 per year. I sold one in West Orange this past year.
And they weren't a problem, or were they a help?
Both of them had both. The first one that was on Colgate was a little bit troublesome, but not too bad a deal. The one in West Orange was a huge problem.
Ooh, why is that?
Delayed closing. Well, because there's a loan when you take out a loan.
Because there was still a debt on it.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And that lien has to be subordinated, so that way everyone knows that it's in the right order of things, and it's cleared up, so that way you can make the full transfer, so that way someone owns the right property.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's going to be more of a common thing as things go along, as people look for solar and other options, especially in Maplewood. I would think it's going to be kind of routine after a while. Years ago there was a big outcry every time a cell tower went up, and there still is now and then. But I think people have gotten used to them. Will that sort of be a common thing now to have solar in homes?
I think it will be increasingly common. I think it'll be less of the strange oddity to the eye, and become more commonplace. And as a result of that, I think that, and as they become much more efficient and improved, construction, they should actually be even less unsightly. They're making them better and better every year. So I do think that we will see an increasing utilization of solar, and I think we'll see it as an advantage. In the past 3 years, there's been a trend towards homes doing whatever they can to make themselves greener, and people are definitely, no pun intended, buying into it.
Yeah, and I know we've been looking at it, and I know other people, and we get a lot of interest too. A lot of marketers, and of course, you always get leery of the marketers. There's definitely more trustworthy sources for solar energy, and obviously the state still has programs available.
Right.
And that's the place people should go. Okay, again, we're talking to Mark Slade. I appreciate your time. Any last words on sort of what people should look at this time of year and in this market right now that maybe is new or different than 6 months or a year ago?
Well, this is that critical time of year where all of a sudden people start to say, maybe it's time to move. It's going to be a long, hard, cold winter. I don't know if I want to be here. Let me move to a nice, warm climate. And the problem is, unless you're already been preparing for it, the likelihood is that it's going to be a little bit too late by the time you can get on market. And so the best thing you can do is start really making your plans. The spring market is basically Valentine's Day, is the beginning of that. Now, and then it'll run through for the next 3.5 months from Valentine's Day. So, if you're thinking about how do I get the most money for my house, you want to make sure you're ready to launch, on Valentine's Day. So you go out and have a nice dinner and then toast to the launch. That champagne bottle hitting the boat of the bow of the boat, launching your property to give you a great yield, so you can then move to where you now want to move, if that is your call. So,
why Valentine's Day? Does the love in the air spark home selling and buying?
No, it's not. I mean, I actually used to quote it as February 15th to get away from that, but
Valentine's Day sounds more fun.
It's better to actually anchor it to a nationally known holiday or event, because it helps to predispose the mind. If I say 2/15, did I mean April 15? Tax day. What did I mean? But when I say Valentine's Day, we all know what that time frame is. We know there's a sense of urgency towards not waiting until January to get ready to put your house on the market. So that's the key right now if you're a seller, a possible seller. And if not, sit back and enjoy the beautiful community that we live in and watch the prices continue to rise and, our community transform, because every time new people come in with the average price coming in, that means more money coming into town. That should mean better restaurants. We've seen an evolution in the restaurants to higher quality restaurants. And, we should see improved quality of services and everything that business-wise that people are going to need. And I would like to think even potentially as prices continue to rise, we may see, more money being infused into the school system to make them even better than they have been.
Excellent. Well, again, we're talking to Mark Slade from Keller Williams and the Slade Home Team. Thanks again for being in touch. Check out all his information online, email, and our open houses every Sunday listing at maplewooding.com. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you so much, Joe. You have a great day.
You too, man. Be well.